All right, good afternoon. It's 12 o'clock on Wednesday, time for the Iowa Learning Farms Conservation webinar. I'm Matt Homers with Iowa State University and happy to be able to moderate today. Iowa Learning Farms is a partnership of the Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship, the Iowa DNR, ISU Extension and Outreach, and USDA NRCS, among many other partners. Really grateful to get to host so many of the webinars, and today excited to hear about work related to dissolved nitrous oxide and subsurface drainage. So a colleague from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, Dr. Luciano Alves de Oliveira, I think I butchered that name, but Luciano, um, really excited to have you here. As always, if folks have questions or comments, please type those in the chat box and we'll get to the speaker at the end of the talk. And so with that, Luciano, the virtual floor is all yours. So it looks like you're unmuted now. So if you try talking,
Hello, hello.
there we go. There we go.
I'm I'm not sure if you can hear me. I'm
I
sorry. We tested and it was fine. Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't listening to Matt at all, so that I got a bit concerned.
Okay.
Uh,
We can hear you now.
can I start?
Yes, you can start. It's a little bit uh like kind of scratchy, but let's see how it starts out.
I don't know why I'm not listening to anything.
Okay, you're not able to hear us?
So, I I can if you give me a thumbs up, I can start and then I can keep an eye on you. Okay, that sounds good. So thank you for the introduction, and thank you all for joining. Today, I will present results from our recent paper on the solid nitrous oxide and tile drainage. This work looks at how nitrogen management and cover crops interact in real-world conditions here in the Midwest. Before diving into the results, I want to take a moment to acknowledge my co-authors. This paper was a long journey, and it would not have been finished without their dedication. It was really nice to work with them. It was a work that took us 2 years and a half, basically. Uh, what I'll present today is truly a team effort, and this work comes from the Dudley Smith Farm near Pena, Illinois, where the University of Illinois has partnered with producers for decades through the Dudley Smith Initiative. Our project is part of a broader effort on sustainable intensification of corn systems focused on balancing water quality and nutrient management goals. The work is still ongoing and now is expanding beyond CRI to evaluate legumes and brassica cover crop as well. The farm is about an hour and a half from campus, which made the frequent sampling a real challenge. And we have 16 plots. Each plot drained to at least 3 active tile lines. The scale was very big. We systematically collected 8 by 8 composite water samples, and that took commitment. But what captivated me about the Dudley Smith Farm is how realistic it feels. Those are large plots, drained the way real farms are drained, and being out there almost every week gave us a close connection to the field. We know tile drainage carries nitrates into streams. So what is less obvious is that it also carries nitrous oxide, dissolved, invisible, but real. When that water hits a beach or a stream, the gas escapes to the atmosphere. And these dissolved emissions are considered indirect because they originate in the soil, move with the water, and then escape later to the atmosphere. In greenhouse gas inventory, this is the emission factor 5G pathway. This changes from the surface fluxes that we usually measure. For greenhouse gas inventories, it's important. The IPCC assumes a fixed emission factor, but actual Midwestern data are very limited. The few studies we do have
Luciano,
suggested wide variation.
Can you hear me,
In the
Luciano?
US, inventories rely on global tier 1 defaults from the IPCC, which means our numbers for tile drain agriculture are not really grounded in local evidence.
Luciano.
Globally, direct emissions from leaking and runoff are estimated to account for about 24% of agricultural nitrous oxide emissions. Yet, our confidence in those numbers is rated low because of sparse measurements. For our region, we still lack strong field evidence, but by directly measuring dissolved nitrous oxide in the noise, we can begin to close that gap and provide numbers that truly reflect what is happening here. Subsurface.
Okay. I'm gonna see, Luciano, if you can maybe try your other set of microphones. Yeah, let's switch that. For those on, we'll work to see if we can't get.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that sounds a lot better.
Okay, now
Yes, yep.
I corrected
we knew
you,
it was
and I can
garbled.
hear you
We're
now.
working it. Okay, all right, we're back to it. Okay.
Okay, should I go back to the beginning?
No, I don't think so. I think we can start from here. That's okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will start from this one. So, subsurface drainage dominates Midwestern row crop systems, including Illinois and Iowa. The nitrate losses from tiles are well established. They are directly linked to Gulf hypoxia. But indirect nitrous oxide emissions remain a major uncertainty in both regional and global greenhouse gas inventories. The IPCC, for example, uses a global factor of 0.0075. In this matter, field studies in the Midwest, as I mentioned, are few, and they expand from a wide range from 0.0002 to 0.018. Reviews also pointed out how little we know about cover crops and their influence on dissolved nitrous oxide. For example, earlier field studies in tile drain systems like McGill et al. In 2018 and Wagner-Riedel et al. In 2017 reported factors from almost 0 up to well above 0.01. That variability shows why regional measurements matter. Cover crops, especially CRI, have been studied extensively for nitrate retention, but their role in dissolved nitrous oxide dynamics remain almost absent from the literature. That's why we set up this experiment, basically to generate empirical data for our system and provide evidence where the literature is thin. Like I mentioned, this experiment was conducted in 2021 at the Dudley Smith Farm in Pena, Illinois, and these are poorly drained soils: Virden silty clay loam, Oconee silt loam, and Harrison silt loam, typical of what we find across central Illinois. These silty clay loams are naturally poorly drained, which is exactly why tile systems were installed across central Illinois. Without drainage, these soils simply cannot sustain consistent corn and soybean yield. These 16 plots were in continuous corn in 2021, and each one was hydrologically isolated by border drains, so that water from one treatment never mixed with another. The drainage system was designed exactly to NRCS standards, 1.2 meters deep, 18 meters apart, and built for a drainage coefficient of 9.5 millimeters. So 3 to 4 feet deep, 9 feet wide, 36 feet wide, 40 feet wide, and 3 of 8 inch for drainage coefficient. That design gave us real-world drainage conditions while still allowing scientific control. In the cover crop treatment, CRI was air-seeded into standing corn in late September 2020 and then drilled again in November after a dry fall limited establishment. It was terminated in late April 2021, just a few weeks before planting. Fertilizer was applied as urea ammonium nitrate, UAN, 60% in the fall and 40% pre-plant for the pre-plant treatment, or the split, 40% pre-plant and 60% side dress at V6, V7 for the split nitrogen treatments. That's important because the side dress timing matched exactly how farmers manage nitrogen in Illinois. We applied 4 treatments, each replicated 4 times, pre-plant nitrogen, a split nitrogen strategy, split plus CRI, and a zero nitrogen control. The total nitrogen rate was 224 kilograms per hectare, aligned with regional recommendations. In other words, we farmed these plots the way farmers actually do here in Illinois, same crop, same rate, same timing. That's important because the results are directly relevant to producer practice. To measure what left each plot, we collected both water and gas data directly at the tile outlets. Drainage flow was logged every 15 minutes with pressure transducers, and from that we calculated daily discharge. For nitrate, we used auto samplers that pulled a small amount of water every 6 hours, building the 8x8 composite sample, and that gave us a reliable load without analyzing hundreds of bottles, but we actually analyzed 100 of bottles. More in a year probably was close to 1,000 bottles that we analyzed. For dissolved nitrous oxide, we sampled about once a week from March to September, always between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. We pumped water from the control structures into syringes, transferring to evacuated vials preserved with zinc chloride, and later analyzed it on a gas chromatograph with an electron capture detector. That allowed us to quantify very low concentrations of nitrous oxides dissolved in the drainage water. Pairing the flow data with these concentrations, we could calculate cumulative loads over the season, and from there we could derive the emission factor, which compared the nitrous oxide leaving in the drainage water to the nitrate loss. The 2021 water year was wetter than normal, about 1,195 millimeters, I think close to 45 inches, compared to 1,000 millimeters average. That excess water shaped how nutrients and gases moved through the system. I mentioned the cover crops were seeded in the fall 2020 and terminated in late April. Because rye was seeded late and terminated early, biomass was modest. That is typical of what many Illinois farmers experience when they try to fit rye between corn and soybean harvest. The corn was planted in mid-May, nitrogen went on May 1st for the pre-plant plots, and June 15 for side dress. Those dates matter because they lined up with the drainage events that we had. One of the biggest drainage pulses came on May 17, just 2 weeks after pre-plant fertilizer. That timing drove much of the nitrate and dissolved nitrous oxide loss that we observed. And this was one of those classic scenarios farmers know well. Nitrogen just applied and a heavy rain 2 weeks later, and that timing really shaped the season's loss. So when we look at the results, remember this timeline. Fertilizer, rain, temperature together explain the peaks we saw in both nitrate and nitrous oxide. As expected, all fertilizer treatments produce significantly higher yields than the zero nitrogen control. That validates the design, the crop responded to nitrogen. Among fertilizer treatments, split nitrogen had the highest mean yield at about 12 tons per hectare, and also the highest agronomic efficiency, nearly 40 kilograms of grain per kilogram of nitrogen applied. For perspective, agronomic efficiency here approached 40 kilograms of grain per kilograms of nitrogen, which is higher than many regional benchmarks for corn. That shows how effective split nitrogen can be. Despite the perception that rye can compete with corn, in our study there was no significant yield penalty from including rye in the rotation. When we added CRI, yields were slightly lower, but that was largely due to late seeding in the fall. with one pass in late September and another in mid-November, followed by an early termination in April to avoid planting conflicts. Spring was also cool and wet, which limited rye growth, and these are the common conditions for many Illinois farmers, so the modest biomass here actually reflects a realistic scenario. What is important is that even under these conditions, we still observed meaningful reductions in nitrate loss and dissolved nitrous oxide concentration. Here's the story on nitrate. Cumulative loads were highest in the pre-plant treatment, followed by split, then split plus rye, and lowest in the 0N control. The rye plus split nitrogen cut nitrate loads by more than a half compared to pre-plant, from 32 down to 14 kilograms per hectare. That reduction was statistically significant. Split nitrogen alone showed a reduction of about 1/3 compared to pre-plant, but that difference was not statistically significant. Still, the trend points in the right direction. One striking moment was May 18, when pre-plant plots spiked at nearly 17 milligrams per liter, just 17 days after the fertilizer application, and 1 day after a major rainfall event. That's the kind of timing farmers recognize. Heavy rain shortly after fertilizer can drive big losses. That single event illustrates how quickly nitrate can move. In less than 3 weeks, a large share of the applied nitrogen had already reached the drainage water. Across treatments, nitrate concentrations exceeded the drinking water threshold of 10 milligrams per liter multiple times, highlighting both agronomic and regulatory relevance. To put nitrate and dissolved nitrous oxide in context, we calculated the emission factor, and the ratio. This is the value that IPCC used to estimate indirect emissions. Across treatments, the emission factor ranged from 0.0034 to 0.0065. All of them fell within the IPCC default of 0.0075. Compared with the default, our values fall right within the expected global range, which means Illinois drainage is not an outlier, but it still needs local numbers to improve confidence. Notice the trend. When nitrate loads went down, the emission factor went up. That's a ratio effect. If you shrink the denominator, the value of the fraction increases. It doesn't mean more gas is leaving. It means proportionally the share looks bigger. So while rye plus split nitrogen gave the lowest nitrate loads and lower dissolved nitrous oxides, its emission factor value was numerically higher. This highlights why we need to look at absolute fluxes and not just ratio. The takeaway is that our measure emission factor values align with the global default, but add regional evidence where it has been missing. Dissolved nitrous oxide concentrations started very low in March, below 8 micrograms per liter. The first major rise came in late May and June, about 2 to 3 weeks after the pre-plant nitrogen application. Pre-plant plots showed the highest levels, with concentrations climbing toward 50 to 60 micrograms per liter. After the June 15 sidedress application, we saw another set of increases, especially in the split treatment. For example, split plus rye rose by about 66% from 22 to 37 micrograms per liter. Overall, concentrations ranged from less than 8 micrograms per liter up to 60 in the peak. That's why a wide swing, and shows how sensitive dissolved gases are to timing and conditions. The ranking stayed consistent. Pre-plant was always highest, then split plus rye, and then 0N control the lowest. Interestingly, dissolved nitrous oxide concentrations remained elevated for several weeks after fertilizer, showing that the system continued producing gas even beyond the immediate rainfall events. So the pattern is clear. When fertilizer went on, the rain moved the water to warm soils, dissolved nitrous oxide rose in the drains. That's the same story farmers know for nitrate spikes, but here we are tracking the gas. Now let's talk about the drivers. Why did dissolved nitrous oxide rise when it did? First, temperature. Both air and water temperature showed strong positive correlations with dissolved nitrous oxide. Warmer conditions accelerate microbial activity, increasing both nitrification and denitrification rates. Second, oxygen availability and redox potential. We found negative correlations, meaning that as dissolved oxygen and oxidation reduction potential went down, dissolved nitrous oxide went up. This makes sense. Low oxygen reducing conditions favor denitrification, which produces nitrous oxide. Third, nitrate availability. We saw a moderate positive correlation between nitrate and dissolved nitrous oxide. The relationship wasn't as strong as temperature and redox, but it points to nitrate as the substrate for microbial processes. Statistically, the correlations were strongest for temperature and redox, weaker for nitrate. That tells us the microbial environment, warm, oxygen-limited soil, is the main driver with nitrate availability as the fuel. These drivers lined up with the hydrology of the season. After the May 1st pre-plant fertilizer, we saw a drainage event on May 17, followed by a warm weather. That combination, high nitrate, water movement, and rising temperatures, drove the largest spike in dissolved nitrous oxide. So the mechanism is clear. Fertilizer timing supplies the nitrogen, hydrology moves it through the profile, and microbial conditions, warm, low oxygen soils, transform into nitrous oxide that then exits in the drainage water. Both nitrification and denitrification likely contributed, but under these wet conditions, denitrification was the dominant pathway. This pattern aligns with previous findings that dissolved nitrous oxide is controlled more by microbial environment than by fertilizer rate alone, emphasizing the role of soil conditions. Now bringing together what is good for yield and what is good for water and gases. Split nitrogen alone gave the highest yield and the best agronomic efficiency, and from a farmer's perspective, that is attractive. When we added rye, we didn't see a yield penalty, but we did see the biggest drop in nitrate and dissolved nitrous oxide. That makes split plus rye the best option for water quality. Pre-plant nitrogen had the highest losses and no agronomic advantage, is the weakest of the options. Zero nitrogen, of course, had the lowest losses, but yields were far too low to be viable. So there is a trade-off. Split nitrogen maximizes yield. Split plus rye maximizes environmental benefits. Both are far better than a pre-plant only strategy. You can think of this as a two-axis problem. Yield on one side, water quality on the other. Split nitrogen moves you up the yield axis, while rye plus split nitrogen moves you further along the water quality axis. These results illustrate that environmental and agronomic outcomes are not always perfectly aligned, but stacking practices can move both in a favorable direction. The value here is choice. We can improve nitrogen management for productivity, and if we are willing to integrate rye, we can push even further on water quality without sacrificing yield. To conclude, this study shows that split nitrogen management produced the strongest agronomic response, while stacking split nitrogen with rye cover crop cut nitrate losses in half and reduced dissolved nitrous oxide. All emissions factors fell within the IPCC default range, but the treatment differences demonstrate how management shapes these dynamics. The results provide field-scale evidence that has been largely missing from Illinois and the Corn Belt. They add drainage-based measurements of emission factors and water quality that strengthen regional inventories and inform conservation strategies. Building on this foundation, our next step is to expand monitoring across multiple years and include surface flux measurements that we didn't have in this experiment, alongside dissolved gas. This integrated approach will capture a more complete picture of nitrogen pathways in draining landscapes. This will also let us see how weather variability, wet years like 2021 versus dry years, changes both nitrate and dissolved nitrous oxide patterns. And we are also beginning to evaluate how grazing cover crops alter nitrogen cycling. Integrating livestock may shift the balance of nitrate loss and greenhouse gas emissions, and quantifying those effects would be critical for understanding trade-offs in integrated crop livestock systems. When livestock is integrated, manure inputs, trampling, and residue removal all interact with nitrogen cycling, and we want to quantify whether that accelerates losses or creates new retention pathways. Quantifying these processes under integrated crop livestock system will also contribute directly to refining Tier 2 emission factors for national greenhouse gas inventories. That was what I had to present today. I'm really sorry for the beginning. We had tested the microphone and this headset. It didn't work in the end, but I hope everybody could understand more towards the end.
Yeah, you bet. The sound was great towards the end. So I'll go through these logistical slides, and if folks have questions, please type those in, and we'll get those to Luciano at the end here. If you're on today and you are wanting to earn a CCA CEU, please email Elena Whitaker, ALENAW @iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today. Include your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, and your CCA number. Again, Elena Whitaker, ALENAW @iastate.edu. Let's go to the next slide. If you watch this webinar live and are willing to fill out a voluntary demographic survey, we'd greatly appreciate it. Only one survey response is needed for 2025 webinars. You can scan that QR code or go to iowalearningfarms.org/survey, either one, to fill out that survey. I apologize, I am tongue-tied today. Okay, let's go to the next slide, which should be David Ramtkowski used the fields of opportunities to clean up forever chemicals, using the fields of opportunities to clean up forever chemicals. So David is with the University of Iowa Civil and Environmental Engineering. And then last slide should be, if you want to go back and watch this webinar or forward it to somebody that you think might have interest, the webinar will be archived at the iowalearningfarms.org website, or we have a YouTube channel just dedicated to these. So go watch to your heart's content. All right. Did have let me just see here. Okay. How do you expect drainage control structures that may promote denitrification to affect N2O emissions?
That is a very good question, actually, because we are all looking to this trade-off that if we increase the moisture and reduce the amount of oxygen in the field, that might impact the increase of nitrous oxide. But I don't want to say that that is going to happen, because I've seen a lot of things that I was expected to happen and it didn't. So we are trying to push more water table management or drainage water management research here to look two things: how it affects gases emission and how that will change, mainly for the idea of how much the farmer is putting nitrogen in the field and they are just losing by the air or by the water, obviously the drainage. And the second one is how much, when we put the control structure for drainage water management, how much we're losing through seepage, lateral seepage. That is a data that prevents drainage water management to be included in the nutrient loss reduction strategy in Illinois. And those are the two things that we're proposing to continue doing research to perhaps understand better the system.
Okay. Do you have a sense of the percentages of farmers that might be using fall N, spring N, and side dress? And then maybe you can just describe, somebody was asking about the split application. Maybe you can just describe that a little bit more on what the split application was.
Okay, I don't know what the percentage of farmers would be using or not. The ones that are here close to campus, Champaign County, this central part, most of them are family farmers, and they are just doing the way that they can save more money. So if they have to do one application whenever they can, that being done in the fall or being done early in the spring, they will do it. I have talked with some farmers too that they love the concept of having cover crop or cereal rye. That is the only thing that survives this region due the cold. But they say sometimes my profit is what I would be investing on putting cereal rye in the ground. So they just don't do it because otherwise they would be spending more money
Yeah.
than what they are receiving.
Okay.
The way that we did the split
Okay.
nitrogen.
Yeah.
So when it was V5 to V7, we went with the side dress and just the corn was not too tall, so it was able just to spray in this. Well, I'm not going to repeat the side, but underneath the canopy of the corn that is still short. We realized that the corn was looking on. Okay, that is probably the 8th season that I'm looking at. In the split nitrogen, when we do the side dress, a few weeks later, the corn always look better than the one that didn't receive. So it's just spraying the side of the plant. I don't know if I answered the question, but that's what I've experienced and what I talk with people here.
Okay. Did you calculate what percent of the applied nitrogen for the different practices was lost through the tile? Recognizing that not all of what we measure in the tile is coming from what's applied, but
I don't have the numbers here with me, and they are not published in this paper, but we had calculated for every single corn season. I can go back and get the value if who asked the question that be in touch, I'll gladly provide that.
Yeah, they can maybe be in touch individually. So there was a question, what was the soil organic matter at this site?
5%.
Okay.
4 to 5% across all the fields, never changing.
Okay. You mentioned it, and I will admit, I might have spaced out a second. So your integrated livestock systems, are you going to be grazing you're going to graze these plots? I was just talking to somebody about this morning. Are you going to graze these plots? And
So the
if so,
idea,
with what?
yeah. So the idea is to have the animals grazing around March and April if possible. So it is not exactly the same farm. It's another farm that we have, instead of 4, we have 3 treatments.
Okay.
One is cover crop plus grazing, and the other is just the control, so we can compare. We had a trial this year, but obviously it was for seeing all the mistakes that we would do it, and then we don't repeat next year.
Okay.
It was great.
What were some of the mistakes? So some of the rest of us can learn from them.
Okay, so the first one, we requested permission for the animal use.
Okay.
They said, yes, you can use it, but they didn't give the document. So whenever the animals were halfway through the experiment, they came to us and said, hey, the animals cannot be there. And then it got in that, in the end, it worked fine. We are not sure if we can publish the data because of that problem, but we can use for pre-proposals and this type of thing. Second thing, half of our plots didn't drain at all. So it was very, very dry. It probably carried over the low soil moisture from previous years.
Yeah.
So I don't even know how to analyze the water quality coming from the tiles, because they are not existent for half of the treatments, so more than half of the treatments. What else?
Were you grazing with cattle or sheep?
Yeah, it was Angus.
Okay.
We didn't we didn't put the total capacity because we thought that there was not a lot of cover crop for the animals to graze. We were completely wrong.
Okay.
So we could have doubled the animal unit on each paddock. Not paddock, in each plot.
Yeah, that kind of relates to a question that just came in is you mentioned you had low biomass in your study. How might larger biomass affect the results, or would they?
Okay, those are assumptions because I didn't have the experience. But if the biomass increases, probably that is going to retain more nitrogen on the field. If I am not grazing, the biomass will stay there, so I can use a little bit of that buffer nitrogen for the following crop. If it is corn, we can always try to reduce the amount of nitrogen application. I know that is a critical topic. Nobody is going to say, yes, I believe you, I'll apply 20% less nitrogen. But we are here in the university for that, to try these weird things and see if they work or not for a long-term experiment. And if they prove that is correct, maybe we can start telling that story. I know that the amount of biomass is related to the crop, to the weather. So if there is more water available, it's going to grow more. And if you leave the crop enough in the field, not in that case because we had a problem with our seed stands, probably would have at least double the biomass that we had.
Okay.
That's what I believe.
There's one more here about have you done any work looking at legume cover crops and their impact on N loss? We've not really done much beyond Kura clover here in Iowa on a legume.
I don't know if I understood. Can you repeat, please?
Yeah, somebody was curious. Somebody was curious how adding a legume to rye could further reduce N loss by allowing a reduction in N application. I wasn't sure if you all in Illinois have done some work with legume cover crops.
We were not lucky with legumes. Every time that we planted any type of legume, it didn't grow at all. The first frost, everything dies, and then you end up with an empty field.
Yeah.
The brassica this year came along fine. So we are excited to see those numbers. We don't have them closed yet, but we'll be glad to report.
Okay. All right. I think, Luciano, that really addresses most of the questions that we have in there. A number of people have said that they were glad grazing was included, and same here. We all can learn from some of what happened there. I still remember Laura Christensen had a poster about, all the things that can go wrong in research. And so when we integrate livestock with our drainage plots, we maybe find a few more of those. So really appreciate your willingness to share this information with us. As always, if people need a CCA CEU, please email Elena Whitaker, ALENAW, at iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today. Include your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, and your CCA number. Tune in next week, kind of fields of opportunities for forever chemicals. And as always, this should be archived on the Iowa Learning Farms website. Luciano, again, thank you so very much for sharing your information. We will look for more from you in the future on various topics.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Yep.